Hello, everyone. I am claudiumurgan, the host of the Spiritual Inspired Show. And my guest today is Dr. Mick Collins from UK. Mick has had a diverse career since leaving school in 1972 at age 15. He has worked as a builder's laborer, infantryman, and heavy good truck driver, as well as traveling and working around the world for 6 years from 1977 to 1983. He also lived in a Tibetan Buddhist monastery in the UK between 1983 and 96. Mick's personal transformative journey includes working through an experience known as spiritual emergency. This deep encounter this deep encounter catalyzed his vocation and inspired him to train as an occupational therapist, which led him to work in an acute mental health setting and in a specialist psychological therapist team. During this time, he spent 9 years training in process-oriented psychology, incorporating humanistic and transpersonal methods into his therapeutic practice. Mick also worked for 10 years as a lecturer and director of admissions within the Faculty of Medicine and Health Sciences, University of East Anglia, Norwich, UK. He retired from academia in 2015. Mick is also the author of several books: The Unselfish Spirit, Human Evolution in a Time of Global Crisis, which won the 2014 Scientific and Medical Network Book Prize; The Visionary Spirit, Awakening to the Imaginal Realm in the Transformocene Age, 2018; The Restorative Spirit, Illumination of Conscious and Soul Progression in a Time of Global Awakening, 2022. Mick, thank you very much for being here today.
It's great to be here, Claudio. Thank you for the invite.
I know you gave many interviews in the past, and we'll try to avoid the regular and normal questions and go deeper into the subjects you wrote about, and try to bring a new light on these subjects. So let's start with something which you're fond of, and types of evolutionary shifts that are happening in the world now, and particularly the connection between consciousness and conscious.
Yeah, well, I think this is the real zeitgeist that we're in at the moment. With whether people are aware of it or not, as Jung said, we can either follow the signposts of individuation or be dragged by the scruff of the neck. And either way, we're going to get taken along with this. And of course, what happens in times like this is that we have to also meet the shadow. There's a process of purification, if you wish, if you look at it from an alchemical perspective. So there's something really magical about the spectrum, the scope of our human consciousness, which we can engage. But at the same time, we have to then work with our conscience, our moral conscience, because the evidence of what we've done on the planet would suggest quite clearly that we've been out of balance and acting inappropriately with the natural order. We've dominated the world rather than cooperated with the world. So there's an absolute wonderful time of awakening at the moment. And we within that, we've got these really hard pieces of work to do as well, which is encountering the shadow, coming to terms with our own past misdeeds, because none of us are, well, there might be a few that have, squeaky clean, but many of us we've got past that we have to catch up with. And I like the word atonement, which of course, that lovely way that it connects with at-one-ment, but at the same time, the root meaning of that word is wholeness. So, this is a time of clearing up and connecting, and then reformulating a new relationship with people, planet, and psyche. So that's where I think we're at. And, I was dragged along by the scruff of my neck into this journey in 1986, when, as you've mentioned already, I had a mystical experience after living in a Tibetan Buddhist monastery for between 83 and 86, not quite 3 years. And that mystical encounter changed everything. It was one of those spiritual transformative experiences that changed the whole essence of who I was, why I'm here, and what I'm going to do with the rest of my life. And that has continued now since 1986 to the present time. So, it's been, that was a rude awakening.
Yes, and you made two interesting statements. One is the cleansing, which in my opinion has to be both spiritual and physical. And the second one, you mentioned ethics. So do you think that the ethical layer of who we are is thinning day by day, and we forget what's moral and what's right, and going more on the wrong side?
Well, I mean, that's interesting, because it would suggest what you're saying, that ethical element, is that we are aware of our behavior, that whether we choose to recognize that is another issue. And I say that because we find that our conscience might be pricking us. We might be getting some sort of taps on the side of the head or the heart or the hara to wake up, but we ignore it because of our everyday appetites, our everyday addictions, our everyday expectations of what we think we're here to do. Like some people are hell-bent on making a lot of money or gaining a lot of power, and that's going to get them nowhere in the grand scheme of things. It's a very short-term goal, if you wish. But, where I think we are being awoken is in our unconscious. So our dreams will let us know when we're out of balance. Now, the problem is we've got a society that has trivialized the unconscious. We've trivialized dreams. We've trivialized the transpersonal. In fact, we've not even considered that it's even relevant to our lives. It's nowhere to be seen hardly in our institutional makeup, in health, education, industry, commerce. Where's the transpersonal? You get glimmers here and there. So how do we get the checks and balances to wake up in this ethical way that you've just said? And what's the moral imperative to do that? And for me, the dreams are the primary route here, because they will start to show you where you're either resonating with the law of love and wholeness in a process of atonement, or whether you're actually kind of moving away from that and the dream is trying to wake you up to that. And so, we've got some serious work to do to become really coherent in our consciousness and in our conscience. The two need to go together. And of course, that means we've got to have a transpersonal understanding of consciousness and a moral conscience that really understands that we can't carry on the way we've been treating the world and each other. So I think you're absolutely right that this ethical probe, it's around us, but whether we're choosing to take notice of it is the issue. But our dreams will be telling us.
Yes, we're gonna go deeper into that. But do you think that this social degradation is also a result of the governments and societies, corporations, sorry, in fact, treating us, the regular people, as employees or not humans, but tools that through us they can reach their own goals, either is control or profit for the bottom line, or anything which is related to physical activity and profit in the end?
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head. There's a sort of a disconnect with, what people really wish for in their deepest soulful connections with life, and which is not always to be at the beck and call of someone who's using them to just get what they want. And so our institutional makeup, I mean, not all institutions, because there are some good ones and there are good employers, but I think the general tone of the world at the moment is one where we're seeing these corporations that are just trying to maximize every last bit of juice out of somebody, squeezing, maximizing profits. And, in a way that this is just, it's totally unsustainable. But more importantly, what's it doing to the collective psyche? what's happening in the collective psyche when we think that's okay, when we think this is the norm. And where's the interest in our institutions to stop and do a stock take of what the soul is trying to tell us? And I think to really start to stretch it out a little bit here, if we want to do that, I would say there's a karmic imperative here as well. And, we owe it to each other to help each other to remember that the karmic propensities that we're unleashing in the world that will come back to us in a future incarnation or even in this incarnation is the issue. Now, rather than othering the people who are running the show in a way that demonizes them, how can we say, guys, you're getting it wrong. I'm really worried about you. You think I'm at the bottom of the pile at the moment, but I'm really concerned about where you're going. That might be now they would think that we're probably having an extreme state of consciousness and just ignore us. Yes. But I think if we had narratives that showed us this potential is a truth rather than a fantasy or some sort of new age hyperbole, I think if we had this sense of narratives that showed the impact of this reality, I think that might really start to shift. And why not? Because we're ripe for the shift. We're ripe for that conversation. Many people don't know it because they're still acting out in the way that they think is the way to success. But really, we need that conversation.
Yes, I think we can, in a way, behave similar to the way they behave to us. If they ignore us, we can just turn the tables against them and say, we're going to ignore you. We are not going to do whatever you ask us to do. And we are many, and you are a handful. So we have the power.
That's right.
That will be without violence, but just in a very decent and loving way, as you mentioned.
Yeah, I think so. Why not? I mean, there's a very strong, really is a strong issue, this actually. I mean, I wrote in my last book, The Visionary Spirit, that there's a real tension happening. So I wrote that, it was published 3 years ago, but I was obviously writing it 5 years ago. And I just said that, one of the real tensions that's going to happen is the tension between the transhuman and the transpersonal. And, with increasing artificial intelligence and the threat of, on every level of that, of course, it's got its good side, and I would be stupid to ignore that. But, like if you had a stroke and you had a prosthetic arm that was robotic and it helped your brain reprogram itself in terms of movement quickly, rather than having a once a week physio session, why not? But if it starts to come down to implants, which are then, getting so pimped up with technology that we then forget what we are as a human being, that's going to have a massive impact on the soul. So we've really got some work to do. And I think, this is not just a future threat. This is imminent. I mean, I saw a program on the BBC, I think it was, or anyway, I can't remember what channel it was on, but about artificial intelligence and the way China's cities are now building in complete artificial intelligence, facial recognition. Oh my Lord, so much, So I think even the way we're talking about power has to be reconsidered. I think we're now looking at a soul narrative and empowerment that really honors our transpersonal potential and doesn't just give in fully to the transhuman without really picking up the transpersonal. Without that, I think we're in danger of being lost. And this is right on the cusp of what humanity is about to face. So the stakes are high. This is not just some new age, fantasy. This is a reality. And without
not at all. I mean, transhumanity was one question on my list because I wrote about it in my latest book, Crystal Cloud, where I have people embedded with crystals of their cornea to touch the pineal gland. but the purpose was to awaken them. Awaken them to a better society, to a better themselves, better self, and then connect on the cloud and emerge as new human beings, but not totally or fully controlled by AI. And I recently posted a document. In fact, it's a report which is part of the Canadian government. It's a very high level. So it's a government, in fact, government of Canada, talking about biodigital individuals. And to be honest with you, is, as you said, scary. And it's kind of a science fiction story posted on the Canadian government website. And it goes beyond just, health issues or controlling your heartbeats or neural activity. It's very, very intrusive. And I don't know when this will be implemented. Again, they have dates in mind, 2030, 2040, but usually if the government plants a seed, sooner rather than later, that will become fact and reality.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're almost sleepwalking into this collectively. Not all, because many people are seeing things that are happening and responding in ways, but we've got to be really careful how we take up the baton of change. We've got to be careful that if we try to force change through overpowering a system, that's only going to create more of a karmic thread that's already existed. So we need a new story to actually engage with this. And, the one that that you've alluded to that I would go with as well is that we raise our vibration to really then be able to have a different relationship to life and a different priority, so that we don't just become literally consumed by consumerism or, over-invested in a material reality that at the expense of the soul. And I think this is the catch-up, that because we've neglected this, well, certainly in the Western industrialized world has neglected this for so long, that now we really are having a catch-up. And, we've got amazing Indigenous brothers and sisters that are showing us some incredible wisdom, but we also have wisdom traditions in our own cultures too that we can draw on. And somehow it's about finding all those threads together and seriously doing our work, doing our play and our work. So I think this is really, I'd say crucial, actually, critical.
Yes, it is. And we mentioned during the introduction the specific term, transforming scene age. How do you characterize that term?
Okay, so this is a word that came to me when I was writing the book, because I didn't like the word Anthropocene because it's too anthropocentric. It's all about humans, when actually, what about the more than human world? What about trees? What about animals that live out? And what about nature, flowers, minerals? These are all holy. It's not only humans that are holy. So the Anthropocene really became for me a stumbling block in how I thought about transformation. So I looked up the origins of, because the word transformacene sounds contrived if you think about it, but in fact, transformo is one derivative in Latin for change, and scene is recent or new. So it's a new era of change. The transformacene is that. Now, I've gone deeper with that word as well, because and the devil's in the detail. If you look at the word Anthropocene, the key word in there for me is anthropos. Now, the anthropos is the group soul. Now, it's interesting, isn't it? Because that's the very thing that we've missed. So the Anthropocene has happened. We've degraded the world with layering particles of plastic, radioactive waste, concrete. We've layered the world with that because of a disconnection to the soul. But the anthropos is in the Anthropocene, but we've not been seeing it. So there's something now where we've got this imperative. The transformacene would be to do our soul work and connect to the group soul that connects to the soul of the world, the anima mundi, then we're in a different mindset and a different resonance. And this, as you say, this is so important, because the institutions, the governments that are, let's say, administering our lives, they don't run our lives, but they administer them with pay slips and taxes and all that thing that we have to get through, the boring stuff. But here's the interesting thing. We are having to really do this soul work and have a different frame of reference for the world that we're living in. So to start to see everything as holy would be part of the transformacy, and to connect with others, other human beings, to generate that soulful response to life. That's where I'm imagining the transformacy would be a different agenda to clearing up the Anthropocene. The Anthropocene's a mess.
Yes.
That's how I'm seeing it anyway. And trying to make a potential out of a mess while it's only human-centric doesn't make sense to me. We need another frame of reference. But, you know, that's a contribution I've made to the literature, and I hope it inspires people to think about that.
Yeah, very wise contribution. Thank you. So, Mick, I'm going to try to say something which might seem harsh, and this is related to the existing, the new generations, 12 to 17, 18 years old. And usually when you want to transform a society, you start with kids in kindergarten, and you do or you apply a healthy upbringing. So you have smart, open-minded citizens or contributors to the society in 2 generations or later on in life. And to me, looks like the existing education system didn't do too much good to these generations. It's pretty much brainwashing. They were taught old information, no updates in terms of science or new discoveries in history and biology. So how do you see us evolving by having all these generations being oppressed from an educational and spiritual point of view?
Well, I mean, it's really interesting the way you frame that, because, like you say, it is part of the problem. It's one of the, when I started the speaking earlier on, I said our institutions have neglected the transpersonal, and I mentioned education. I think this is one of the consequences, because what you've got now is this idea that if you give me lots of information, that I can then go out and work in the world in ways that in some people add great value. So it's not a bad education, but at the same time, other people are running out and just thinking, great, I just want to go out now and take everything from me and get rich and whatever, which is proving to be not quite a smart way to go. And so how do we change it? Well, I mean, I can't believe that a top-down approach is going to work. I don't think that's going to be the way. So I think it's about, and how do we do this? I mean, this is almost the impossible question, really. I think the only way that can truly happen is when we co-evolve as students and teachers and get curious about what it is we're in. So one of the things that we only have a certain range of experiences that we welcome into school. We don't welcome in altered states of consciousness, extreme states of consciousness, heightened states of consciousness, the shadow. I mean, things are getting better. We've got forest schools happening in the UK, and so children are going out in nature to connect with nature and feel that sense of well-being in nature. But then they come back in the classroom and there's still a lot of really getting them online for their exams. I wonder whether there is a real opportunity to bring in a much more experiential way of being, doing and knowing and belonging, which is quite radical. And I can only imagine hearing certain parents just almost blowing a gasket hearing that idea, because it's not the norm. I mean, they want their children to be a success.
Yes.
What is a success? I mean, the success to me is that a child is able to walk through the world with a sense of wonder and connectivity and be a good human being, helping others, and, working in a way that's cooperative. And these are the sort of attributes and qualities we need in the younger generation. And I'm sure, and I know many of them have that. I mean, I have 2 grandchildren. We have an amazing kids, but they need support, not pressure. This is their future, not ours. I mean, I'm 65 this year, so I sort of think, okay, that's not old, but it's kind of like going more to the other end of the scale. Actually, what can we do? What can I do to help the younger generation really, be empowered to live that qualities that we've just spoke about?
Yes.
That to me would be the contribution we could make.
Yeah, I think that these generations somehow are afraid to step outside the line and take their life in their own hands and try something new, because somehow they think that they're going to be punished or they're going to be looked at in a very strange way. And this leads me into the next questions about being authentic, because they are afraid, in my opinion at least, they are afraid to be authentic, to be different, to express themselves, maybe because of the social constraints, fear of being rejected, or even being laughed at. So what's your take on this?
Well, authenticity is a really interesting one, isn't it? Because I think this is the heart of what it is to be living to your full potential as to who you are as a human being and why you're here on this earth. Now, I don't know about you, but it took me a long time to get that recognition and that understanding. And, for me, I mean, as when I was younger, I was a complete idiot, and I was all over the place. I made so many errors and mistakes. But I'm sort of proud of what I've become growing into. I don't feel I'm complete at all, but I'm growing into that. And that's a path of authenticity, not something to switch on and off. And so I think there's something for me about that. I'd really like to just check in for a moment. If I think about some of the young people I know in the UK at the moment who are exceptional, I'm thinking of people I know that have set up their own companies around eco activism and are doing an amazing job. And I'm seeing some incredible people coming into that camp, as it were, who are full of ideas and full of enthusiasm. Now, I admit that's not everyone, but I know there are so many talented and gifted young people who are following some of their own threads. I don't think we could say they lack authenticity across the board. Some will, of course, like I did. But what I think is really interesting is preparing younger people for that journey, that, there is a long way to go here, hopefully. And there is a lot to learn about yourself and discover about yourself that only you can get for yourself. Nobody can teach you this. Yeah. This is your experience. And that's why I said I think education needs more experiences, much more authentic experiences of what's happening to me. So I think the ridicule and shame that you spoke about, if it happens because people might feel they're falling outside of the norm, whereas really, let's stretch that open. Let's, as somebody once said to me, well, in fact, last week, a friend who's working on neurodiversity, let's have a different conversation about what's possible and what we're like and what could come forward. I think we're better doing that now than we were, but I still think we've got a long way to go. And to finish up, I think one of the problems that we're facing now, particularly with younger people, is the pressure is coming on them because they're seeing the effects of climate change. They're seeing economic instability and all the coronavirus and all this is going on. And they're probably thinking, oh, my Lord, and we know that mental health issues are on the rise, particularly in young people. So I think there's something where we've got to really try and create the conditions to help that growth in the heat of that experience. That would be, for me, working with using Arnold Mindell's work, World Work and Deep Democracy, and really bringing people together and saying, you know, what you're experiencing isn't crazy or whatever. It's your experience of the world. Let's really and let's find the gift that's in that, because there could be something amazing that's waiting to come out. That to me would be the beginning of it, if we could do
Yes.
that.
Yeah, if we can teach them the gratitude of every moment of living this life and this experience, that would be amazing. And
Yeah.
if we open up to the opportunity this
Yeah.
time offers, yeah, that would be great.
Well, I think so. And you said the word gratitude, and I think that would be absolutely, because, you know, when we think we don't know how many harvests we've got left, if we keep on depleting the soil, what is going on? You know, when you can count, we might only have 60 harvests. That's a really tough one, isn't it? To, you know, so we need the farmers to be educated about, you know, really creating good soil, and, you know, then the good soil feeds our good gut bacteria. Then we're really getting healthy and having powerful immune systems. Then we can, you know, this is not just a psychological thing. This is across the spectrum. We've let everything go a little bit pear-shaped, and that's being polite.
Yes, and this metaphor of, you know, preparing the right soil, we find it in the Bible. You know, Jesus said that, and goes back to the educational component we just talked about. It. We need that particular soil for these new generations to grow fully.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, it's a big challenge.
I read Jeff Rediger, who's Harvard. I met him a couple of years ago at a conference, and he wrote a book called Cured. And it's a great book. It's all about, he said, spontaneous healing isn't spontaneous. People do things really interesting to support their own change. And then he equates gut microbiome as, he said, treat that like it's the soil of your soul. You know, I know Satish Kumar has spoken like on that soil and soul metaphor. But I think that's right. If we really saw that we are part of the earth, and that's a beautiful metaphor for us to make sure we're nourishing ourselves properly for this journey. It's not only psycho-spiritual, it's physical, it's everything. We've got to do it across the board, radical change. So, you know, I'm excited by that prospect. I mean, I think it's overwhelming at one level, but it's exciting.
Yes, it is. I mean, Earth and God created everything for us to be healthy. Plants, you know, any type of food, fruits. All we have to do is to go back to the ancient knowledge and apply it.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely. You know, I try to live my life with thinking about, you know, everything I put in my mouth. I do have a few indulgences here and there, but generally across the board, I try to keep it as clean as I can and as healthy as I can, because I know really, if we're going to be doing this work, we got to be fit. You know, a little exercise every day, a little bit of eating the right, well, always eating the right food, and meditation, dream work, activating our potential, working through shadows, blocks. This is the work, you know, and that's the education, if you wish.
Yes, indeed.
That's the education.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If we can expand a bit on one of the chapters of your book, Revolutionary Intelligences and Interconnected Living, what's your take on it, please?
Well, I write in that, and that was in the first book, I think. That was the idea that we're connected to intelligences that are bigger than our, because we normally think of intelligence as IQ, you know, and now we're getting like, well, no, we have emotional intelligence. So we think, okay, well, that's good. So Daniel Goleman, I think it was, who wrote about that. And then we get spiritual intelligence, and we think, oh, good. But the trouble is, we think that's all us. The IQ, yeah, we've got a big investment in that. The emotional intelligence, I always point to the heart when I say that. Yes, that's us catching up with the being emotionally intelligent, and spiritual intelligence, what we bring to this interconnectivity that we're in. But you know, the intelligence is actually far bigger than us. We're a receptor for it. We're not the creator of it. So the interesting thing then is, how do we then blend those us and our sensitivities to these multiple intelligences that we have, connected to this bigger intelligence that is waking us up, that is resonating at higher levels of frequencies, that inspire us through dreams, through epiphanies and awakenings, and then actually harnessing that. And here's where the education link comes in. So then we're not fixated on passing a test, that we actually then think, hang on a minute, let me just check out what is going on here. Let me just feel into that for a moment. And then checking out the channels, wait for a vision to come. See what that vision is telling you, and just give it time. Try not to just use it like you would in a formal written test or an exam. That's not consulting with these wider intelligences. So I think we've got an amazing connection to this world of cosmic intelligence, which brings great wisdom and helps us grow in our frequencies and our connectivity to life. And I'll tell you a lovely story about the mystical monks of Mount Athos in a bit on this front, which ties in beautifully. Shall I tell you it now?
Please.
Okay. So one of the bits of research I've been doing for my new book is, which is called The Restorative Spirit, is I've been looking at mystics and what do we learn from these mystics? What's the thing that we can take for where we're at now? And as part of the research and the reading, which is always a big job, I stumbled across what's called the Invisible Monks of Mount Athos. The minute I read that, I thought, okay, I'm interested. Who are these people? Now, I read lots of books about Mount Athos, and then I came across a person called Elder Paisios, who was a very gifted, he had great grace and great clairvoyance, and was a very prayerful man. And he basically had met one of these mystical monks when he first joined the peninsula. There's 20 monasteries on Mount Athos. And when he first went there in the 50s, he got lost, and it's a wilderness. You can get very seriously lost, and there's wild boar. It's a dangerous place. Anyway, he met all of a sudden, this person just appeared and told him to go that way. And he said, well, where do you live? And he said, oh, up there somewhere, which was the top of the mountain, which is 2,000 meters high. And all of a sudden, he went back and they said, well, you've met one of the invisible elders. Wow, lucky you. What a blessing. He went on, and he used to meet 5 of them every 4 years. Now, generally, the way they present themselves to people is they have they're males, these ones. It doesn't mean to say that there aren't female ones there, but on this tradition, they have long white beards, they're naked, and they have a light aura. And there's a beautiful story, and this is the intelligences now that I think we're looking at. There was a time when this young monk wanted to become an ascetic in the tradition. So he took on an elder, and the elder was teaching him in the ways of prayer and contemplation and scriptures and how to work as to have a vocation as a monk. And he was very determined that he was going to go and live a lonely life on the edge of a cliff as an ascetic. That's his mission. Anyway, he's in the narthex of a church one night, and he's sitting there doing his prayers, and he was prepared to spend a lot of time praying, when all of a sudden the door opened and a naked man walked in with a long beard with light. And he's like, who's this? So he kind of hid, and this being went around blessing all the icons in the church, then left, and he quickly got up and followed this light being. And as they're walking up the Mount Athos, the mount itself, he managed to move ahead of this monk and stopped him and said, will you be my elder? And the elder said, you can't live where I live. You can only live there by grace. So the guy then got very upset, and he said, listen, he said, go back down and study like you have done. But he said, study hard because you're going to die soon. And he blessed him. And the young man went back, and 3 weeks later, he was dead. But when he died, there was a smell of perfume all around him. So there was an awakening too. Now, to my mind, that's what we should be working with, is this elevating and refining our vibrational connection. But we have to do the shadow work as well as that. So it's not one or the other, it's both together. And this is where Jung gives us a really good understanding of that. So I think that's a nice illustration.
Yes, very nice, very beautiful story. But see, in my opinion, and I know some people won't agree with that, and they might even leave some nasty comments. The
Okay.
way the religious institutions right now, and especially Catholic and Christian Orthodox, are approaching the teachings is not necessarily the right approach. Doesn't help people, in my opinion at least, to fully advance on their spiritual path because there are too many customs, too many labels,
Yeah.
too much structure,
Mm.
which keeps someone who wants to evolve spiritually down.
Yeah.
The moment he realizes that the path is different and the connection with spirit, with God, can be direct and they don't need an intermediary, this is where that connection with the church, with the religious structure is broken because they don't fit anymore.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And what fascinates me is the mystics that are somehow in those traditions, but they transcend them and go beyond them. You get quite a few of those. And so my story is not advocating for any particular religious viewpoint. I'm just curious that what happened. There was no reference points to anything other than a relationship with someone who is teaching someone to go inside. Yeah, it happened within a confines of a church, and that can happen in a Buddhist connection. There's plenty of Buddhist masters and men and women in all traditions that have had these experiences. So I'm not advocating for one approach or it can only happen there. I'm just curious that was an amazing story that shows something about. So for me, the experience of that goes beyond the tradition. And if you're a slave to the tradition, then you're probably not going to have the experience like that. And if you did, you won't know what to make sense of it because there'll be no book that tells you. So, yeah, I mean, if people don't like the story, then that's fine. There's plenty of other stories. There's stories of shamans that do that. But I also don't want to be prejudiced against any tradition that has also people that have interesting experiences. I think there's about an open mind to all of this. So we know from, if you look in the Chan tradition, Shu Yun had a wonderful, beautiful empty cloud, his name was, had the most incredible, lived to be 120. At 112, he was beaten up by Red Guards, but he went into Samadhi and he was taught by Maitreya at the time when he's being beaten up. And when he came back, he forgave everyone. So, I mean, these are just wonderful stories. And Dawa Drolma, the great female Tibetan mystic, who was taken by Tara to all the heavenly realms and the hell realms, and she learned so much about what was happening in those realms, these different, I suppose you would call it realms of existence. And when she came back, she had messages from Tibetan lamas that had passed away, and she gave them to the current ones that were still human in their human form, and they were like overwhelmed. And she is a Tibetan lama. Beautiful story. So I don't prejudice one group over another and think they're better and they're worse. Experiences are experiences, and they can happen to shamans, Christian mystics, you name it, Buddhists. Yeah. So that's for me anyway. Yeah, I can't see any harm in that.
Yes. Staying on the spiritual path, the slogan for the World Economic Forum is by 2030, we will own nothing, but we will be happy. And I went through some of their printed materials, some of the videos, and there is no reference to the spiritual development of the individual.
Yeah.
So do you buy into this, in my opinion, empty concept of happiness?
Well, I got to be honest. If the World Economic Forum are telling us how we're going to be, but they haven't even got an idea of who they are. I mean, from what I understand, the Great Reset is what they call it, isn't it? The Great Reset.
Yeah.
So they want to reset to tell us how things are going to be, but they have no notion of who they are. I mean, are these enlightened beings that have reached their full potential? Because they're the ones I want to listen to. So straight away I'm just thinking I don't buy it. No, that's going to be a very comfortable Davos inspired Illuminati, if you wish, to then probably make life good for a few people, because that's the trajectory. That's being cynical. but I don't dislike them for it. And who knows, they might actually be hidden masters, and we'll never know. I don't think so. But the idea that, economics is still determining happiness, and we're still in a monetary economics. We've not understood that happiness is its own economy, like in Bhutan. Their sort of GDP is happiness.
Yes.
Now, I don't think the World Economic Forum have quite got there yet. So I'd be suspicious of, well, hang on a minute, where are they trying to lead us? And I think this is the problem. When we're being led by a sort of a group mind, but the group mind haven't evolved or got no interest in evolving, then what are we doing? I mean, I would take that with a pinch of salt, personally. For me, it's about having a regular practice, living soulfully and connecting with other human beings to try and make a difference as best we can. That would be my guiding principle. The great overarching vision that other people have for you and me, I don't buy into. So I remember in the 70s, there was a program in the UK called Tomorrow's World. And all the time it said, here's going to be a new device and it's going to save you time and money and you'll have more leisure. That's how it's always sold. And whenever I hear that, I go, uh-oh. So they said, and this is called a computer. I remember seeing the show. This is a computer, and in the future we'll all be using them and everyone will have more time and it'll be so beautiful. And yeah, we've got all these devices, but everyone's as busy and crazy and stressed as they always were, because nothing's changed. And I don't think the World Economic Forum are going to change that, because they got no interest in that.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, so as you said, there's no mention of the spiritual. So I would really say the challenge for us is to get this authenticity and actualize our potential, and to draw whatever inspiration turns you on, whether it's shamanistic, Christian mystic, alchemic, whatever, crystals, dance, whatever wakes you up, then do more of that, but connect with others and appreciate that you're waking up together. And I mean, I'm going to take seriously your comment saying some people would hate what I said about that Christian mystic. Well, that's just creating more of what's been. If we're hating, what are we doing? I want to find the spot in me that goes, I really learned something from that story, and it's teaching me all the time that there are these light beings, the invisible monks of Mount Athos. All they do is pray for the world for peace. What's wrong with that? So, yeah. I mean, that's my challenge as well, is to not get hooked in a tradition, but also to pick up on the experience and love it if it's worth loving. And, So
do you think that embracing love fully is the solution to save ourselves and evolve?
Well, it's got to be in the mix, because, we know from many good people who've spoken about this subject. Marianne Williamson comes to mind. She's a real absolute gem. What is the opposite of love is fear. And we're in a very fear-orientated society at the moment. We have been for a long time. And you mentioned that the young children that are fixed by fear. Well, what's driving that fear is comparison, self-loathing, self-judgment, judging others, all the shadow stuff. So we've got to move through that. Well, what will we move to? Well, yes, a more coherent transpersonal consciousness and a moral conscience, but it has to be centered in the heart. That's where the work begins. Every spiritual tradition I've looked at, the heart is always the place of transformation, and the heart is also mystical love. We're not talking only relational love, which is beautiful because that can be a pathway to the mystical, but we're talking about mystical love. And if you've had an experience of that, I wrote the story for you in your anthology where I woke up in a state of bliss. I've also experienced that in prior to having an extreme state of consciousness in '86, where I was just overwhelmed with love for days. So, I know this. I've had an experience of it twice where it wasn't a love that was conditional on something. It was just universal love. So I know that exists. I can't quite get there. Every day's a struggle. But actually, I know that this is why we're here karmically, to clear these filters and to help the purification of this. And so the shadow work goes with this higher consciousness, but also with a moral element to it. So we treat each other in the world better. And I think love is the glue that helps that connect.
Yeah, and at the same time, do you live your life from a place of surrender?
Surrender, yeah, absolutely. It has to be, doesn't it? I think it's interesting, that word, isn't it? Surrender.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's got to be a giving up of something to receive. Because if you're so full of like, I found it, or this is it, or whatever, there's nothing. There has to be a sort of an emptying. In Buddhism, they have emptiness. In Christianity, they have kenosis. Both of them is to become an emptier vessel so that more can come in. And yeah, so I kind of think that surrender has got something of that in it, that we sort of become more open, more curious, more humble, and humility, I think, is one of the big ones.
Yes.
It's to walk gently on the world, on the earth, and with others, and to try and be helping others where we can, even the ones we don't like, because it's so easy to think, I'm finding it and I'm elevating myself or something, but actually ignoring all the people that you might think, well, I don't want to connect with them, but in fact, they could be a gift to us. I mean, I have a story of a friend of mine who was robbed. A person had a gun, and he came to his house, and but he made him a cup of tea, and they got talking, and then it ended up being a session of soul searching. And the person said, "I think I need to change my life." And then my mate went and got him a few dollars and said, "Well, let me do that," and gave him a lift home. And he said, "I might come back for another cup of tea." And he said, "Why not?" That's that's a true story. That's a true story. It's a very dear friend of mine who said that. So, wow, I'm not there yet, if I'm honest, but wow.
I think if we are not afraid of that in that particular instance, and we treat that person as we will like to be treated ourselves, and embrace that threatening, let's say, situation with an open mind, I think, yes, we can turn it around in a positive way without being hurt. I think that's interesting. Yes,
I think so. I remember the reading about the Dalai Lama when he met one of the monks that had been interned for 18 years in China, and when they knew him before he was put in prison, but when he was released, he went to Dharamsala and he met the Dalai Lama, and he said, were you ever scared? And this is a true story. The monk said, yes. He said, I was frightened I was going to lose my compassion. When I read that, it's in a book on the forgiveness by the Dalai Lama. When I read that, I just thought, oh my God, this is just like another level.
Yeah.
This is another level. I mean, you got to have humility and say, I mean, I still have in me some fire, I mean, look how red I am. I don't know why I'm so red, but anyway, I probably because I get excited talking. But no, I think there's something about that we have to. Arnie Mindell, who's a great transpersonal psychotherapist, process-oriented psychologist, he was a Jungian analyst, says we need to burn our wood. If we got fuel that's fueling our difficulties and projections, we need to burn that, clear it out. So a bit like a purification, really.
Yeah, and to think like that monk about losing his compassion, we have to transcend to the level where we don't care about the physical body. We understand that it's just a vehicle, and the soul is eternal. And that awareness will take us to the level of, yes, I'm afraid I'm going to lose my compassion, or my gratitude for whatever I'm doing today. Yeah, it's beautiful. Yes, thank you for the story.
So beautiful. I mean, when you read stories like that and you just think, wow, that is a teaching. That's a teaching. I mean, my friend who I've known for 40 years, when he told me that story, I said, what was it like? He said, well, prior to this person coming, it was 3 o'clock in the morning, and he was up really early, and this guy was in to rob the house, and he was reading the Dalai Lama prior to this event happening. And then he had this moment where he just felt total love and compassion for this guy, even though he had a gun. He just said, look, can I make you a cup of tea? And the guy was like, what?
He was prepared. He was prepared for that moment.
Yeah, but isn't it interesting that, we sort of, when we're in these comfortable existences like we are here in the West, we're not having much exposure to that. And so when it happens like that, we could be forgiven for reacting really badly. But actually, his story, and you've reminded me of that, so thank you. His story makes us think, you know what, we can respond differently, even though we haven't had much exposure to that in our life, because we've been doing the work.
Yes, and in fact, it happened to us in 2019. We visited a country in Europe. I don't want to give names, so not put a bad spot on it. We knew that there are a lot of pickpocket people, and we might be exposed to something like this. And within half an hour after landing, my wallet was stolen with all the money we had, with my credit cards and driver's license. So I didn't panic. I just canceled everything. I had to pay triple for the car, to get a different car. With friends landing 2 days later in the same city, they brought us some cash, and we enjoyed the next 2 weeks traveling the country without thinking of that bad experience. We just took it as a lesson, and next time we're going to spread the money around the family, so I don't carry the whole treasure with me. And lesson learned.
Isn't that wonderful? I love that. And I love the way that you took care of the country as well. That's beautiful. Because it's very easy to just sort of slightly demonize, a place or a group or whatever. But actually, this can happen anywhere. It makes me think, why, may I ask you, did you, or what sort of learning did you get from that for your spiritual practice? Because that's a beautiful story.
You mean the one I just mentioned?
Yeah.
I didn't put too much into it until 2 days ago, and I'm going to tell you why. I read the books of Malidona Some.
Oh, yeah.
He was born in Burkina Faso, and he had amazing spiritual experiences in his tribe when he was initiated and later on. And in his latest book, The Healing Wisdom of Africa, he mentioned about going to a town in Burkina Faso for the first time. It was a main city in that area. He was driving a brand new car, empty streets, green light, and a motorcycle comes from the right and hits him. And usually there people go outside, they go out of their cars and they start yelling at each other, blaming each other, whatever. And in this particular case, the motorcycle, the guy driving the motorcycle came over and said, "Are you new to the city?" And he said, "Yes." That means you didn't pay your dues to the spirits of the city. This is happened because you forgot to do that. The spirits, the ancestors, are asking you to pay your debt now. So I realized that maybe the money which was taken away from us was a tribute to the spirits of that particular city, or a kind of punishment because I didn't thank and that I bring any thanks at the moment we landed for the spirits, for the ancestors of that land. So I can connect any way I want based on my experience, based on my connection with my guests and everyone else. So again, I didn't turn it into a negative experience, but something I should learn from.
Beautiful, wonderful story. I love that, and thank you for reminding us of that, because it's always makes me think about that. Not only the ancestors that are connected to a place and a group, but also the spirits of the land, and also our own guardian spirits. That somehow there's a lot to connect with here, and just to say some prayers that are connecting up is part of the work, eh?
Yes,
a big part of the work. And I've sort of tried to do that myself more intensely as I've got older, and realizing that in fact this is really important work. You learn through not doing that, and then you realize that some of the synchronicities that are coming to help you and are just part of that gift. So the spirits are, they're with us when we connect with them.
Yes. Mick, we both write about climate change, about environment, and we are, passionate about this subject. And even in the 80s, we were told about, climate change and the fact that we should take care of the environment. But, it didn't affect in any way the humanity's consciousness. We didn't take care of anything. And while we are trying to implement the new Green Deal and go as green as possible, these new technologies still require rare metals and still require aluminum, silver, gold, and it's still a pollution or polluting component of these green technologies. How do you think we can mitigate this risk and this contradiction pretty much?
Yeah, well, I think it's the question that everyone is putting all their energy into, isn't it? And mitigation is the big thing that is driving, how can we mitigate our emissions and also all the pollution that we're putting into the planet. And of course, what goes with mitigation is adaptation. And, the two go together. So mitigation's one thing, but it's going to need us to adapt and change our behaviors. Now, for instance, there's something like, oh, yes, I've got a car, it runs on petrol. I know, I'll get rid of that now and then I'll get an electric car straight away. Well, the amount of energy, you might have just been just as well not using your car so much and driving that one for another 20 years rather than getting a whole new car with all the components that are going to be, so it's thinking carefully about this. And, it's so tricky because we talked about artificial intelligence and the big tech revolution that's coming. And of course, that can be used well in terms of energy saving, so we can use things more smartly. I guess for me, the thing would be keep things for a long time and upcycle everything that you can. Try not to, just think, well, I know, like I just gave the analogy of I'll get rid of this car and I'll get that new one there, because the energy that one's now just going to go in a landfill and this one took a lot of energy to make. Use different modes of transport, but just use that one carefully and judiciously. I don't know the answer, if I'm honest. I really don't know the answer, but I know one thing is that we won't make, it's not just about goods. It's not just about having the right goods. It's about having the right consciousness and conscience that actually then chooses the right choices, to make those good choices that are right for people and planet. And I think that's going to be part of it. And that's as much an adaptive response in us so that we can mitigate the best. So, for instance, if you need a phone, and we've got them, have one for 6, 8, 9, 10 years or whatever. Don't change it just because there's a new model on the line. I just got rid of my old phone because it had no battery left and it was an iPhone 5. And so I've now gone and got an iPhone 12, but then I'll probably get an iPhone 25 or something, I don't know, later on. But don't get the new one. Take it till it's collapsing, maybe.
Yes, I'm always 3 generations behind when it comes to phones.
Yeah.
And I think the technology companies will force us out by changing the network, if it's 3G or 4 or 5 or whatever the number. But this is what they are good at. They are forcing us by not supporting a specific device or an operating system or a specific network. So kind of we are forced at one point to switch, unless we want to stay analog. But I don't think those phones are still around anymore.
I think there's a few. I did see someone with one the other day and I was very impressed. But no, I think there's something here about there is built-in obsolescence, and you can actually get battery upgrades on things. I could have done that with my iPhone 5, but it didn't have enough capacity to hold So you use apps and then you haven't got enough storage on it. So I think, okay, it becomes a problem then. You're having to delete apps and upload them, delete them, upload them. So I just thought, well, it's time now to get a new one. But that's been quite a few years between that one and this one. So, you know, maybe there's a lesson there for us to think, do I need that? Do I need what I think is a new computer, new phone, new car? Maybe not. Maybe I'll try new habits. And I mean, so this adaptation, we know, I wrote in the Visionary Spirit, it's got to be both how we're occupied and adapted. It's got to be deep and transformative. So we've got to be deeply occupied, as if not only occupied with what we're doing individually, but occupied in relation to this bigger connectivity with life and this intelligence. And I would say one of the things I'm exploring at the moment is what I call a double occupation. So when we're occupied in our own volition as soulful beings who are on a path of growth and spiritual evolution, that we're also occupied with our guardians who are occupied in relation to our higher purpose. They're often helping us, but we don't tune into them. So, you know, there's a whole load of things we can do to really, Jung called his guardian a daemon. That's a Greek word for a kind of a guardian spirit, if you wish. Yeah, sometimes they shake us up a little bit, but it's to try and get us on the right path. So if we look at that work, and I always go behind me for some reason, if we look at that work, how are we occupied with our sort of evolving consciousness and conscience, but how are we tuned in to the helpful beings that are occupied with us to do that work? That's a double occupation.
Yes, and if I can say something wise in this discussion is always follow the advice or the message your guides are asking you to follow, always.
Yeah. And can I add another element to that?
Yes.
And check it out. Be discerning. Be discerning. Make sure that you're getting, you know, there's some wonderful stories of people that will follow anything and get in a mess, but you've got to have a bit of discernment. Jung was very tight on that. And you'll know that the discernment is right when you say, okay, so you want me to go and climb on the top of that roof. All right. Why would I want to do that? What's right? You know, and then you just then you're not just being led by something willy-nilly, but there's I feel anyway, it's important to have a level of discernment. Like you do that with a dream, you do that with a vision, you check it out and you check in with what you're being opened up to, you know. So yeah, I think that's discernment is a big word for me.
Yes, Mick, we are approaching the end of the interview. It's been a pleasure. Any final words?
Any final words? Yeah, I think live your dream, trust your dream, and, you know, don't live other people's dreams. So if somebody's selling you something from an institution that's looks like everything's all gold and beautiful and wonderful, just think, hang on a minute, is that what I really want? And what does the planet need? What's happening in the dream of the earth? What's happening in the dream of the ancestral spirits and the guides and guardians that are with us? You know, that's to me following the dream and being tuned into that. And yeah, and then living it, being occupied with that. So that becomes something that is a soul journey of expression. And then we'll be change agents. I noticed you've spoken to Nicole Gruhl before, and yes, she's agents of awesome. So, you know, I think that's the word, you know, if we can really become miracle workers, but we need to go deep and we need to connect to the living dream.
Yes, thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you for the invite, Claudia.
Thank you. And for my viewers, thank you for watching. Like it, share it. Support me on patreon.com/claudiumurgan. Get a free copy of my book, The Decadence of Our Souls, when you visit my website. And until next time, love and gratitude.